to begin with, we've got to talk about Gyökeres.
We had Mikel Pugh list, didn't we, with the set pieces last season.
Man United have got to trust the system and each other much more.
I like the sound of that flying V, Dino.
I think that they need to think about switching Declan Rice and Martin Ødegaard in those attacking 8 positions.
It's been 78 days since the last episode of Tactics Exposed, and in that time, Tottenham have regained the Spursy tag they so recently shed. Chelsea have been crowned world champions, and Arsenal and Manchester United have both splashed massive money on 2 number 9s that they both desperately needed. I'm Will Pugh, and that is the Sun's tactical guru, Dean Scoggins, and we're back in the Tactics Exposed studio, as we will be every Monday and Thursday until the very end of the season, lifting the lid on the tactical plots and tricks employed by the Premier League's greatest managers as the season rumbles on. Dino, it is great to have you back. Betfair are on board with us again for another season, and we're kicking off with an absolutely mouth-watering clash. Manchester United versus Arsenal at Old Trafford on Sunday. How are you? How's it going?
It's brilliant to be back. Thank you. Yeah, I'm so looking forward to the new season. I know that people have been awash with tactics and speculation of who's going to do what over the summer, but now we can actually talk about what is going to happen in the Premier League season. Got the number 9s in.
Exactly, mate. I dragged you into my world of transfers with Transfers Exposed, but now we're back in your comfort zone.
Absolutely, yeah.
Look, Dino, Man United v Arsenal at Old Trafford on Sunday. As always, on Team Talk on the Thursday show as the season goes on, where we look ahead to the biggest games of the weekend. We will be answering your questions, so make sure as the season rumbles on that you let us know what you think in the comments and across all of our social media platforms at The Sun Football. And question 1, Dino, will go to on the screen in a little bit. New logo as well, by the way. Who will have a bigger impact? Benjamin Sesko at Manchester United or Viktor Gyokeres at Arsenal? What a question to start the season
well, it was
with.
the only place to start, really, wasn't it? The number 9s. And yeah, absolutely fascinating to see what they do. And you know me, I'm not one for predictions and telling people who's going to win games of football, because that empties my betting account when I do that. But impact-wise, it's very difficult to talk about Benjamin Sesko too much. Yep. I'll try and do that in a second. But to begin with, we've got to talk about Gyökeres. And please, pronunciation police, please give me a chance.
You'll be calling him Viktor in a couple of weeks' time, won't you?
But what I found fascinating from the Bilbao game, okay, so we can actually look at actual evidence of their last pre-season friendly, the games that he's played in, and obviously, when Amorim came into Manchester United, and I did a lot of work watching sport in Lisbon, I can talk quite considerably about Gyökeres.
Yeah.
But the Arsenal thing for me that's fascinating straight away, all right? So we've got the 2 teams set up straight away on our lovely tactics board. We'll come back to United in a minute, but we've obviously got them in the 3-4-3 Amorim setup.
Yeah.
And then we've got Arsenal in their traditional Arteta sort of 4-3-3 as well, but obviously that's very much either a 4-1-3-1 or it's a 4-2-3-1, depending on how they adapt. And obviously Arsenal will defend in a 4-4-2 pattern as well, but we'll come back to that. But what's fascinating for me straight away from what we've seen is obviously Gyökeres is going to try and get on that last line of defence, okay? He's going to let's move Arsenal up the field. Odegaard and Rice moved into those attacking positions. So as I talk about all the time, that 5-man attacking shape, okay? And then obviously they'll get other players join in. But just to keep this clean for a moment, Gyökeres here, obviously, they want him going in here, right? Occupying those spaces, driving into those spaces that they missed that last year.
Yeah.
We go back through their stats. Top goal scorer, I think, was Havertz in the Premier League with 9.
Yeah.
Just not good enough to win the title.
That's not title winning, is it?
No, and Havertz missed 15 games and he still ended up as their top scorer. So Havertz did a great job, by the way. That's not me digging out Havertz. But now they've got the number 9. Okay, so that's kind of simple, right? Get into those areas and get Gyökeres running in behind for those passes that go down those channels, right? A little bit more simple. Let's drop it in. So when they're in a midfield sort of position where, let's say, United have got 3 up, the midfields have gone matched up together, and so have the forwards. So straight away, you see Gyökeres in this zone here. And what I found really, really interesting in that first game was how much he came to feet.
This is the 3-0 victory against Bilbao.
This is the 3-0 against Bilbao, okay? So he did the donkey work in behind, running the channels, what you'd expect a big physical centre-forward to do. But what I think we'll see a lot against Man United, and a lot as the season goes on, is Gyökeres comes in here, okay? And then really key, is we're not going to see Saka as much isolated out here and Martinelli or Madueke isolated out here. We're going to see them in here much, much more often, where then if Gyökeres comes into feet, they are going beyond Gyökeres, okay? And bursting into these channels in here. So we'll see this flying V from Arsenal much, much more often. You saw, times where last season Saka in this area was completely isolated, and we'd see him with 3 or 4 defenders around him, and then he has to come backwards to Odegaard, and he's got nobody running in that hole, okay? What we're going to see is a much, much tighter front three with Gyökeres either in front or dropping back in between, with those two coming off the touchlines in order to join them in those positions.
So are we talking, Dino, similar to sort of Levi Colwill, Nicholas Jackson, which we spoke about a lot for Chelsea last season, where he gets the ball in the defence, Jackson drops in and there's that direct ball. Are you expecting similar?
Absolutely. The Arsenal instructions, the Arteta instructions in this new way of playing with Gyökeres is get the ball forward quicker. Because what they struggled with last season is as soon as a team against them, let's say United obviously with a 3 at the back becomes a 5, the 2 midfielders drop in, they'll get the workhorses of the 10s going in there and a striker coming in there, and straight away you look at this section where you go, okay, Odegaard might push on, Rice might push on, and Zubimendi's in here, Lewis Skelly will invert and Ben White will try and push on that side, but he'll move in this area here. Straight away, we've got channels blocked, we've got difficult, and they struggled against that low block all the time, okay? I'll come back onto that later on. But yeah, absolutely. What they want is the game now stretched, okay? So they win the ball back when they're in a 4 or a 3 at the back, and Rice and Odegaard are going to burst forward, and they've got 4 or 5 Manchester United players in this game up the field. Obviously, the wing-backs will be pushed on, and they want the ball fired in here. So then they can get to 3v3. And look, if Martinelli or Madueke, whoever plays this side, tracks back, it's their job to then get in here and burst into here. And we'll see Rice do it as well. Go beyond Gyökeres in there. So the passes from either Odegaard, often from Miles Lewis-Skelly, and I think we'll see it a lot from Saliba. A lot from Saliba fired into Gyökeres' feet. So it'll be a much more dynamic Arsenal front line with Gyökeres in it, and much more direct. And there's nothing wrong with that. Teams have now got to find ways of beating these presses, and all of that goes through phases of play and difference like that. Right, let's forget that. Raya into Gyökeres, Saliba into Gyökeres, Zubimendi or Ødegaard coming short into Gyökeres. That's going to be a new way of Arsenal playing.
Yeah, it sounds a bit more... we had Mikel Pugh, didn't we, with the set pieces last season as well. It sounds like they might be a little bit more direct going forward as well. And I like the sound of that flying V, Dino. I think Arsenal fans will like the sound of that too. Benjamin Sesko then, talk to me. I know, like you said, sort of seen a little bit less of him, perhaps a bit more of an unknown quantity. He was obviously Arsenal's #1 target at the beginning of the window, ended up doing the Gyökeres deal instead because the money was more appealing, but also some doubts, so the story goes, about Sesko's mentality, whereas they didn't have those about Gyökeres. But just talk to us about his impact and what you expect from him at United.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a giant for a start. So 6'5", physicality, everything that Man United were missing in that number 9 position. As I say, it's difficult to show what he's going to do for Manchester United because we've not seen him in action yet. I hope he gets thrown in this weekend. I'm sure the Old Trafford fans desperately want him in there, because if I think they see Højlund or Mount as a false 9 on the team sheet, then they're going to be pretty disappointed. But just talk that triangle again, okay? So where United's will differ slightly to Arsenal's is that where we had Arsenal as a V that way, Manchester United's will be a triangle or a V that way. Okay. Much more the other way around, where
Mbeumo, Cunha,
and then Sesko as the front 3, as we fully expect, and Bruno back in midfield and the wing backs either side. So again, let's talk about where the ball goes and where they work the ball out. Okay, so United will want to go direct into Sesko much more. It's a really interesting interview with Harry Maguire with Rio Ferdinand talking about how United lost possession far too much in this area of the field last year. I was
just going to say that. The amount of times you and I on Tactics Exposing reaction shows talked about how often they got trapped. I remember you talking about the W, which is what they were planning for, right? To zigzag the ball out.
Yeah.
And they got clogged up so often because it was so cumbersome and slow.
Yeah.
That seemed to happen all the time.
Well, let's just show that again, just because that's a really good point. So that zigzag there, okay?
Yeah, that's it.
That's the zigzag that
was always the
Amorim
plan,
is set up to play. Because if this guy pushes on, you've got a ball into there. If he comes in there, you've got a ball out to there. So that it does give you really good options. But Man United lost the possession there a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. So this season, expect them much more to get the wing-backs providing width from goal kicks and balls deep in positions to try and open up this area here. We're going to talk a lot this season, I promise you, about teams emptying midfield.
Right.
And that seems like a bizarre thing to say, but let's go back to that Ousmane Dembele goal. I'm sorry, Arsenal fans. That
for
PSG scored at the Emirates, where if I just use the blue count as a moment here, Nuno Mendes has the ball here. PSG emptied that midfield, and Ousmane Dembele came in here for this ball to be fired in, and all this space here opens up for Dembele to run forward. So let's use that as the blueprint, okay? And if Benjamin Sesko is in here for Manchester United, and then one of the midfielders can collect the ball, it's going to be direct, okay? It might even go from Onana into Sesko, out to a centre-back into Sesko. They might play a little interchange in here and then again into Sesko. But whereas you might see much more often the Arsenal players go beyond the ball, I think the idea here for Manchester United, let's just match up the midfields because there's too many blue counters there. What will happen is they'll want somebody to push on here, somebody to push on here, okay, or that one's got to go there, somebody to push on there, and then you're creating that space, okay?
And so that will be where the fullbacks come in.
That will be where the wing-backs, that come in. So, again, he's probably going to be picking him up. So what they're going to see, let's say, a direct ball into Sesko that then can be laid off to one of these two guys. If it's laid off to Cunha, let's say, then Mbeumo's going to go. Ahmad's going to go. Okay, so that ball into there. So whereas I think that...
And you've got an overload almost.
Whereas I think that Gyokeres' impact on it will be much more holding the ball and spinning and then bringing players in himself or running himself, as per Ousmane Dembele. With Šeško, it'll be much more, I'm going to occupy maybe even two defenders and bring my other number 10s in by knocking the ball back. And then it's a third man run. We've used that phrase quite a lot. Ball goes into Sesko, plays off to Cunha, and then Mbeumo and Amad Diallo are the third men runs for that pass in there and that pass in there. Again, more direct, which is not a bad thing.
No, quite. It certainly feels like Arsenal, with the players they've got in Madueke and Saka, are sort of more geared up to do put the burners on and go in behind. Not that Cunha and Mbeumo can't do that, but you sense they're more technically gifted and you'd see them operating in the middle a little bit more. We'll move on to question 2 now, Dino, but I think for both of those sets of fans, it's like a mouth-watering prospect. Seeing
more
those players
direct and the game stretched and more end-to-end. What more could you want?
Exactly. Right, let's have a look at question 2 that's come in. Will Amorim's 3-4-3 system finally bear fruit? You called it from episode 1 that we did when Amorim arrived on Tactics Exposed. It was the first thing we spoke about. It was the only thing we spoke about. They played Ipswich, I believe, away in his first game, and you'd called it spot on. You'd called it spot on what he was going to do. However, what you didn't say either way, really, whether it was going to be a success or not. But it really wasn't in the end for last season for United, was it? Do you feel, as the question from the viewer comes in there, that's going to be any different this time around?
I do think it's going to be different, and I'm going to
how?
I'm going to be quite controversial here. I think where I think we're not going to see 3-4-3 as much as we banged on about last year. Now I'm going to use a Thomas Tuchel quote here, where a formation is just a framework for players to work within. Okay, we're going to see this season in the Premier League, which I think is really exciting as well, with my nerdy tactical mind on, is that we're going to see much more freedom within formations. Okay.
Right.
Ange Postecoglou lost his job because Tottenham were too rigid and they became very predictable to play against. And Amorim's 3-4-3 was very rigid and very predictable. And let's be honest, even though they finished second in the league, although Arsenal have absolutely quality players and quality plans, those plans were quite predictable. They're not. That doesn't mean you can stop them.
No.
That just means that they're quite predictable.
You said that about Arteta a lot towards the end of the season, particularly.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's go back to that 3-4-3. So they will, on paper, set up in a 3-4-3. No doubt about it. Okay. So let's just say it's Martinez, De Ligt, and Yoro as a back three, Ugarte and Bruno Fernandes, and then Ahmad and Dorgu as the wing backs. And we've mentioned the front three. But what we're going to see much more from United, and what we've seen in pre-season, is a swing to 4. Right. Okay. And when I mean a swing, I mean that this sort of movement of a 3-4-3 moving into a back 4. So obviously, more often, Amad Diallo is going to be the attacking player.
Would that be, Dino, just quickly, when you're talking about that direction of the swing, if the ball's over here?
Yeah, not necessarily, but
yes. Is the direction following the ball?
Yeah, but I think it will be in defensive modes. Okay. So in a defensive setup. So again, last year we talked a lot about how Arsenal set up defensively in a 4-4-2 formation. So if Arsenal were defending like this, then Saka would drop in, and then Madueke or Martinelli would drop in as Martinelli last season, and then Ødegaard would go and become the 2. Of those, and you would end up in this 4-4-2 shape as they're defending, okay? So then you've got, but what United I think will do is Dorgu will drop in, and then they swing. So the centre-backs become there, the right centre-back becomes more like a right-back, and Cunha or Mount or Bruno Fernandes, whoever plays in that position in a particular game, will have the job of moving over into a right wing, which will give Mbeumo much more freedom to stay in dangerous counter-attacking positions alongside Sesko for that knockdown. So we're going to see United swing into that 4 shape. We'll see it quite a lot, I think. And that's a strange thing to say when it was so wedded to 3-4-3. But they need to be much more defensively sound here. So let's just say Arsenal have got a centre forward and a 10. They've got the overload here. They've got the numbers there, and the way they were, and the way that they were set up in that defensive shape last year, there was always an extra man somewhere that they struggled to deal with. So I think we'll see an alteration of that 3-4-3. And the other thing is going to be in the way that they play out with Bruno Fernandes as well. We'll come on to that in a moment. But it will just be, and look, it can go the other way as well, where if Cunha's joined in with Sesko, and then Mbeumo comes over this side, Dorgu pushes on, Martinez or Shaw will move over to this side. The other centre-back goes in, and it just switches shape like that to a 4 at the back, 4 across midfield, and two up front again. So we'll see that swing from side to side for United much more often. And that's because after a load of work on the training ground, miles more work from Amorim with the players that he wants to work with.
Yeah, sure.
I said I'm going to give you an I told you so here. I did say about Ahmad playing as a wing back. And last year they needed him in attacking positions, but now he becomes that extra attacking outlet that they were missing in attacking positions because of that swing. Okay, so and Dorgu on the other side as well. So if they swing this way, they come in. Dorgu then says, and I'm not pretending he's going to come and park as another centre back, but he's in a more left
defensively
position
rather
position, absolutely. And then you've got midfielders who are going to be more dynamic as a 2, and then all of a sudden you've got that front 4 again, which was missing last year because this player was back here.
Dino, then, so just as we prepare to move on to the next question, just to pull you back there, will Amorim's 3-4-3 bear fruit, yes or no?
Yes, they're going to be much better. They've got a front 3 that suits the system now as they didn't have before. They've got 2 wing backs. Still think they need a Baleba figure in midfield.
Fair enough. Well, 90 million quid is what Brighton asking as we have a look at question number 3. Where will Bruno Fernandes play? What a question that is. We've had a look at the system there. Bruno Fernandes, Manchester United's most important player by a mile last season. You expect he's going to have a huge impact again this time around. But with the arrival of Matheus Cunha and Bryan Mbeumo, questions being asked by United fans about where that leaves Bruno Fernandes.
Yeah, and it really moves on to another tactic that I'm delighted that we're talking about Bruno again, because he was a real topic of conversation last year, wasn't he? And I did quite I got quite a lot of criticism from the Bruno Fernandes fan club last year for me suggesting he did too much in that Steven Gerrard type position. I'm telling you I was right, and this is going to change things around, okay?
He kind of felt he had to do that,
He did. And that wasn't a criticism of Bruno. He was working so hard. But now, obviously, he doesn't have to do the things that Mbeumo and Cunha are going to be able to do. So, so Bruno Fernandes, for me, is going to play in the middle of midfield.
That's where we'll start games.
Yes, call him an 8, call him a 6, call him a whatever you like. But it's, again, the formation is a structure for them to start in and then to move into. So again, we talked about the way they're going to play out. And the key is that if Bruno Fernandes plays here, let's say, and Ugarte's there, or vice versa, he doesn't want Amorim. He doesn't want them to be playing as a 2.
Because and Fernandes was doing a lot of basically picking the ball up on the edge of his own box last season, as well as then being expected to do all the creative stuff at the other end.
Yeah, and there's 2 ways to this, so you're spot on. There's 2 ways of looking at this, and both of those will be affected, okay? And it depending on who they play against. And so, first of all, I mentioned that ball into Sesko, okay? So United have got 2 ways of playing out from the back, either as a 3, where this defender here is wanting the striker to go with him, and then the wing-backs really hold the width, so they're to play out. So if Arsenal then are going to press with a 2, like they often do, Ødegaard and Havertz, but probably Gyökeres in this season do that, and then they push these players up here. So the 3 men are these 2, depending on which way they go. So if he comes in here, he's the free man to play out to and play in there. So let's say this is Bruno Fernandes, okay? He's going to want to try and manufacture a position here where he can get the ball deep, come from play, and then he'll be the one that plays that direct ball into Šeško, okay? So that's option number 1. But and they did that a bit last season, but not as effective, as you say, because Bruno kept coming deep. But what I found really, really interesting in pre-season, so again, the wing-backs will hold and maintain the width, okay, which opens the pitch up that way. And what they did was De Ligt went into midfield, which was fascinating. So if a team is going to play with 2 up, it happened in the Everton game, I think, in pre-season a lot. So Ugarte would hold that position there. De Ligt would come from here and move into here. And that meant Bruno can go into there. And then these guys maybe drift, and they become a 2 in there. And all of a sudden, they've opened that pitch up. So it's very brave. And then you give the striker and the 2 pressers a problem. And these midfield 2, you give a problem. Because are they going to go that way and leave it 4v4? Probably not. Okay? One of them is probably going to sit and be told by his centre-back, I want you to play there. This guy's probably going to mark Ugarte instead of De Ligt. So De Ligt becomes the free man for that ball into there to play out. Okay, so look, De Ligt's got a big role there to play. But that means, to come back to Bruno, that we end up with Bruno Fernandes in an attacking position again, making that front 4. The wing-backs join in, it becomes a front 6. So where United last year couldn't get four players in attacking positions at any one time, they're trying to get 5 or 6 now in those attacking positions. So Bruno becomes adaptable.
So if you're saying that Bruno Fernandes, you expect him, kind of understandably, given the money they've spent on Cunha and Mbeumo, to start games in a deeper line position, as we saw last season, particularly. We expect to see the same again, particularly because of the strength in depth of these bigger teams. Manchester United, not quite yet, obviously not quite there yet. Amorim looking to get his first 11 right first. But as games rumble on, those sort of subs around the 70-minute mark, we see them having such huge impacts on the results of games these days. What do you think, what do you expect Manchester United or Ruben Amorim to do, and how will that affect Fernandes?
Well, that gives them that massively good option from that sort of sub perspective. It's almost like you get two substitutions in one. Because if, let's just say, Cunha's not having much joy and they decide they're going to take Cunha off, then Bruno Fernandes, then let's just move them back into formation a second to make that a little bit easier to understand. But Bruno Fernandes, instead of playing here then, goes and plays there in the Cunha position where he can affect games even higher up the field. And then you bring on Kobbie Mainoo or another midfield player to play in that position. So, and that gives them, they're not going to take Bruno off, but it gives them an option for him to play in both positions. But I do think that less and less he's going to play in that front 3. I mean, you could bring Mason Mount on in that position, and then Bruno still plays there and joins the front 3. So, and rather importantly as well, that Man United have got to trust the system and each other much more when now they've practiced it more. And again, you're going to find in a lot of games when you play a back three, that's a back five that becomes a back three, that you've got a spare man.
Yeah.
So they need to trust that Maguire, Martinez, Euro or De Ligt jump out. We call it jumping out of that defensive line to go and pick up another man, which frees up Ugarte and then frees up Bruno to go and press and go and play. And they've got to be braver like that in that formation for the 3-4-3 to bear fruit and Bruno to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely, Dino. And don't forget, and you lot at home, that with Betfair's Safe Sub, your bet is not over yet if the player you have back to score first, for example, gets subbed off, because it rolls on to the player coming on. So, Dino, if Matheus Cunha, you've had him to score first, the scores are 0-0. He comes off, Mason Mount comes on and whips the winner into the top right corner. You still get paid out.
2 for 1.
Right, Dino, we've got question number 4 coming up on the screen right now. Will Martin Ødegaard benefit from Martin Zubimendi's arrival at Arsenal? Bit of a dodgy season by his high standards for Ødegaard last season, so what a question.
Yeah, it's a good one, this. And Zubimendi's arrival in midfield, obviously, the exit of Thomas Partey. And it makes it really interesting for me as the season goes on of the impact on Martin Ødegaard's position. In the second half of last season, he was way off the levels of which we'd expect Martin Ødegaard to be. Let's be honest, they're pretty high levels. So even when he dropped off it, he's still a pretty high-class player.
Yep.
However, obviously, the arrival of Zubimendi in this position here for Arsenal is going to be key, right? And there's 2 reasons for that. One is, look, we expect still Ødegaard to push on in this position here, Rice to push on in this position here, and Zubimendi to become where Thomas Partey was last year as that sort of single pivot, where then Lewis Skelly will come in and make a 2, and then you've still got Timber or Ben White making a back 3 if it needs to be a back 3. If Man United drop in, then that frees up Ben White to bomb on forward as another attacker, and then they again end up in that 2-3-5 shape that we talk about quite a lot. However, right, I think Zubimendi is going to be a real key to this new formation for 2 reasons. In games where they need to play a double pivot, then Declan Rice comes in alongside him against an attacking midfield, a high-quality midfield. And then we've got to see Martin Ødegaard not have his safety blanket around him of playing just with Bukayo Saka. Okay, the way they attacked down that right side with White or Timber, Saka and Ødegaard was obviously brilliant, okay? But they became so lopsided, Arsenal's attack, all down the right-hand side, that poor old Martinelli over here ended up in this position that when eventually the ball was switched to him, the only pass he had was Declan Rice making that charge down that channel, and he found himself often 3v1, not only 2v1. So, look, I'm not pretending that it was not Martinelli's fault as well. His levels dropped off, and obviously they've got Madueke there now. But Ødegaard could find in games that he's playing as the 10. And as I say, when those attacking players, Madueke or Martinelli and Saka, come right in much closer to Gyökeres, then Ødegaard needs to play much more as the buzzing 10. So on this side of the field, as well as this side of the field, and making himself available so that if then players push on these midfielders, he's the one coming in that half space and affecting the pitch both ways. Don't just go this way, go both ways. They need to become double-sided, Arsenal. They're very, very one-sided.
The percentages of their attacks down the right-hand side are so much more.
Absolutely, yeah.
But obviously, Dino as well, don't forget, he could still be battling for his place at number 10 with Eberechi Eze.
Yeah, well, let's hope Eze goes to the other half of North London. But just one last thing there, quickly. So United will drop into a back 5. And we know Arsenal last season struggled against teams in the low block, okay? So this is also relevant to Zubimendi and Ødegaard. So where they found themselves last year was obviously Saka right up, Martinelli right up, Ødegaard in here, Rice in here, trying to make these bursting runs in here. And then, as I say, you've got Zubimendi here, but it was Partey last year. Ben White would find himself, or Timber would find himself in that position. And then Lewis Skelly would go into a midfield 2 there. So they find themselves in that shape, okay? What that meant is that they've got this kind of U shape, right? This horrible kind of U shape. And then when Havertz was playing, Havertz was going back in here to receive the ball as well, or back in this side. And you look at that, they sort of, nobody occupying here. So
the horseshoe of hell.
Yeah, and we know, and also we know now Gyökeres is going to do that, okay? So that solves one thing. The other thing, and this is quite controversial, I think that they need to think about switching Declan Rice and Martin Ødegaard in those attacking 8 positions. Because if Declan Rice is here and Ødegaard is here, they're on their right side for a start.
Then would that not be the other way? Declan playing from the left-hand side of the field?
But that's where he has played. But that, to me, became a problem. So I think there'll be an exploration as the season goes on. Look, Arteta still likes Ødegaard getting the ball here, cutting back on his left foot and delivering that sort of looped cross for those players to go in there, okay? But let's just imagine a scenario here where Declan Rice is still making the same runs, okay? Where he runs into that position there, which Ødegaard doesn't do enough. If he changes that Ødegaard this season and goes past the ball much more often, then that's a different matter. But if Rice goes in there and Saka gets the ball, that's when you get Bukayo Saka in the position you want, cutting in on his left and playing that way. And then let's do that the other side as well. So Ødegaard then, who often doesn't make that run, comes with the ball, gets the ball into feet in this half space where he is a weapon, okay? You've then got Gyökeres running this channel, and then you've got Madueke or Martinelli running this channel. And with Madueke here, with a left foot, he provides that balance for the ball to go in there. So it's something we might see as it goes along, but there's a lot of pressure on Ødegaard this year because I think if they don't score lots of goals and create a lot early, he'll be the first name that the fans are criticising.